Hey, what's up, everyone? My name's Lionel. I'm your host for Elton Productions, and you are watching I Watch You Watch. We are covering Divorced Sistas. This is season 1, episode 4. I appreciate everyone for coming to my channel. Please support by liking this video, and also you can subscribe and leave your comments below. Now let's get into this episode. Okay, so now we ended the episode with Naomi coming to the banquet auction thing. So Naomi is reacting to seeing her friend sitting with Franklin and his now new wife. But anyways, they kind of calm the situation down, get Naomi to sit down. She's very lit, very drunk. And she's having her little drunk moments, da-da-da-da-da. And they're trying to get her to drink coffee. Jefferson, or Jeff, wants Rashida, like, why aren't y'all taking her out of here? What is she doing here? Da-da-da-da-da. Naomi ends up flirting with Javon. She's finding out that him and Tiffany just met tonight. They aren't officially together, da-da-da-da-da. We got Naomi trying to talk to Franklin and the new wife, and Naomi was talking about nice earrings because those were on her before, da-da-da-da-da. There was something that the new wife wanted, and her name is around here. I wrote it down later on. But anyways, she wanted to bid on some type of 100-year-old Bible. And she said, you know, my mom would really love that, da-da-da-da-da. So they bid on it. And I think Naomi has some comments about that. But Franklin turns around and says, well, you've never given anything but to yourself. You've given Coach and all that good stuff, da-da-da-da. And she said, that's right, don't forget Louis Vuitton, da-da-da-da-da. So Javon tries to distract Naomi and said, hey, you know, I'm a photographer, da-da-da-da-da, and I can do some portraits of you, and I can do stuff for you all, da-da-da-da-da, even for you, Tiffany, da-da-da-da-da. That kind of distracts her for a little bit, and Tiffany's like, I see what you're trying to do, but I only want you to photograph me. Then there's an auction for a painting that we find out is sentimental to Naomi. Franklin got it back as far as the divorce. He bought it. And we find out that this was a painting that Naomi's brother painted. And then he disparages the brother, calling him, he was a drug addict and ended up overdosing off of heroin. Really going in on Naomi and how disgusting she is, da-da-da-da-da. And then he starts the bidding to add insult to injury. And he wanted to start that auction off with this painting for $5. And people start bidding, I'll take it $5, da, 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 da. 10, 15, and then he said, hold up to the auctioneer, we're gonna keep it at 10. And everyone is looking at him, at least at the table, steaming hot mad. So then Tiffany says that, what did she say? Bids $5K. That immediately pisses off Franklin. And then Tiffany says $20K. So then Franklin, still upset, he ups the ante and says, I will pledge $5 million. And if it's really valuable to certain people, they would go on and pledge $37 million. Meaning, Naomi, give back the $37 million that you got in the divorce settlement. So he was like, I know this $5 million could really help out the church. Right, Pastor? And the pastor said, yeah. And Rashida's looking like, sir, how come you don't sit him down? What? Let him finish. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So you want to throw out Naomi, but this dude can do what he wants at a church function. So anyways, the auctioneer sells it. The final bidding was Franklin for $5 million. He takes the painting over to the table and tells his new wife, you know, it's a piece of trash and we can hang this in the garage. Naomi at this point just said, I need to go. Let's go. So the girls gather her up. She said, before I do that, I need a drink. She grabs that hot coffee, sizzling pot, and throws it on the wife. And then she's screaming in hysterics. I said, ooh. So they're trying to get Naomi up out of there, but then Franklin tells the security guards over there, or police guards, arrest her. Da-da-da-da-da. So Naomi is taken into custody, and they're back in one of the meeting areas of the church. And Rashida said that she wants to go to the precinct to check on Naomi. And Jeff said, what? You're going to do that after all that she did? And she said, yes. So Jeff is against it. So Geneva steps in to try to stop this argument. She said, look, I will go down there, da-da-da-da-da. And Rashida says, I'll call a judge to see what he can do to help her out, da 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 da. And Jefferson says that he is also against that. So Geneva tries to shut down the argument again and says, let me handle all that, da 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 da. Javon says, I'll go with you. And Geneva said, I got it. I know a couple of I think it's judges. And Geneva says, I got some people too. So then all of a sudden you see William, and this to me right here, I feel like it's an indicator that William knows something. He's got to know something about Javon and Geneva. But anyways, he says, Geneva, go on and go, da 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 da. I can get a ride from someone else because we really got to check on Anika, da 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 da. Bridget offers to take William home. Tiffany says, oh, she's going onto the precinct with Javon and Geneva, da 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 da. The assistant was taking great care of Mr. Jeff, and we see him put his hand on Jeff's leg. Rashida also sees it too. I said, oh. People were suspecting, I think last week or the week before, that probably Jeff is entangled with the man, and now it's basically been confirmed. Oof, Pastor Jeff. The assistant was like, well, you need to check about, because he got burned too with the coffee, da 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 da. And Jeff said, I'm fine, da 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 da. Whatever. Will and Bridget, they are headed home, and they talk about Franklin's behavior. And Bridget was like, oh, well, don't you know Franklin, da 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 da. He said, yeah, but he's kind of a hard person to get to know. And Bridget described what he was doing tonight as Franklin was torturing Naomi, and Will agrees to that. Will has all this positivity, da 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 da, in regards to this whole situation. And Bridget says, I love how you love my friend, Geneva. And Will says, that's my soulmate. Then they talk about Bridget's boyfriend. I forgot his name right now, but anyways, Bridget's like, what am I doing? And William said, I think you know exactly what you're doing. You love that young piece of thing. Let's just put it on the table, Bridget. You just don't like everything that comes with it. But then Will says, him and Javon and Tiffany are talking. If they don't work out, why don't you give Javon a try? I don't know about them. Maybe so. Da 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 da. But either way, whatever happens, if you and the boyfriend don't make it, if nothing happens as a connection with you and Javon, keep trying. And then they said, oh, good old positive William. Also in another car, Geneva, Javon, and Tiffany. Javon is driving. Geneva's in the front seat and Tiffany's in the back, which I think it should have been the other way around, but hey. Javon says that he's worked things out and a judge will see Naomi as soon as possible. And they talk about the photography of Javon. I guess Javon is a lawyer, but whatever, blah, 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 blah. And he says, yeah, I'm quite the good photographer. I took some photos of Gigi over here. I said, Gigi? Tiffany said, oh, you never said that. Da, 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 da. It was in the past, da, 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 da. And Geneva doesn't really want to talk about it. Can we just focus? And Tiffany's like, well, I'm just trying to distract you because I see da, 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 da. And she says, I don't want any distractions. We got to keep focused on what's happening to our friend. Another car sequence. Rashida's in the car, Jeff is driving, and Jeff is like, are you crying? And she's like, what? Basically, why can't I cry? Anyways, Jeff said, well, by the way, I need you to know that I'm fine. And he says, I got burnt too. Well, it looks like Myron was being attentive. This is the assistant. And Jeff was like, you think every woman and man wants me? And she said, basically, yeah. So then Rashida was like, you pay me no attention. You undermine me. You embarrass me. You do all these things in front of me. You don't even pay attention to me. And you only do that in front of the church. And also how the house is ran. Your son right now has poor grades and da-da-da-da, and he's so disrespectful. And Jeff was like, I thought you were handling that. Yes, but also your perspective, you need your hand on this and your voice on this. Da-da-da-da. Talk to your son. Then at this point, Jeff is being sarcastic, and now he's saying, I don't really know what to please you. And she said, excuse me? Oh, this is the part. She says, you constantly criticizing me, da-da-da-da-da. You're always turning things on me whenever we're trying to have a real conversation. You didn't even, I kept asking you about Franklin, and you wouldn't give me a straight answer. And then he says, all I know is Franklin came at the last minute, and you didn't tell me at the last minute either, da-da-da-da-da. Jeff knew from the beginning. We know that. Let's stop that. And now Jeff says, Naomi's the problem. I don't even understand why you're hanging with her. Basically, she's a demon, and you can't save Naomi. And she's not worth it. And Rashida got very offended by that. You're a pastor, and what are you talking about? Basically, Jeff wants her to cut Naomi out of her life. And Rashida says, you can't tell me who I can and cannot be friends with. And Jeff said, you cannot, in turn, you cannot tell me who I can and can't invite to any function I have going on. Jeff says that he's tired of the arguing. And Rashida said, fix it. Well, I can't fix it by myself. I forgot what she said. She said something else. She said something to end it off, blah, 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 blah. She's putting the ball back into Jeff's corner because it looks like Rashida does try to show up to try to fix things, but he's always doing something to deflect. True narcissist behavior. Crazy. Let's see. At the precinct, William ends up calling Geneva because they're sitting there, and he's just asking what's going on. It looks like a judge is going to see Naomi pretty soon. She doesn't know when she'll get home. It'll probably be a long time. And then he asks about Javon and Tiffany. Is Tiffany there? And she said yes. So how are things going for them? And she says, you really want me to talk about that right now? Like, I'm not in the mood to do that. And William's like, you're right, blah, 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 blah. So then he was talking about trying to give Geneva a compliment. She's not really taking hold to it. He says, I love you. She says, I love you too. And then they talk about something else, and he says it again, I love you. And then Geneva hangs up the phone. As we see Geneva watching Tiffany and Javon, Javon's just really yakking it up with Tiffany, like he's really enjoying what all Tiffany is saying and doing. Bridget gets home and talks with the boyfriend. The boyfriend's really saying, look, I didn't see it before, but now I get it. And she said, get what? That I'm really not a good fit to be around your friends, da-da-da-da-da. And she's like, what? Acting like she's oblivious. He's also saying that he doesn't feel, I know that I love you, but I don't know if you love me. She said, you know I love you, blah, blah, blah. You know how I feel about you. And she said, I don't think so. He pulls out these plastic flowers and tells her to smell it. And she's like, and then that's when she discovered that they were plastic. Like, what? So then she said, we need to, I'm going to treat you special tonight, basically have sex, and you run me some bath water. I said, okay. So really the boyfriend really understands how much Bridget does not really value him, unfortunately. At the hospital, they talk with Franklin to get his perspective as to what's going on with the wife. And she said that she's in critical condition, da-da-da-da-da. She's laid out there on her back. And talks about Naomi, that effing B. And Rashida was like, what? He was about to say, but then Rashida cut him off at that point. So you're going to take her side? And Rashida was like, I'm not taking anyone's side in this, y'all. Both of you are playing games. So you believe her actions were justified? Franklin is saying, no, I don't disagree with it at all. I don't agree with it at all. But I would have said I understood why she did what she did. I would have said that. Then Franklin was like, you need to tell that B, Naomi. And Rashida said, I told her to stop. And I'm telling you to stop. And then Franklin tells Jeff, you need to get that, what did he say? You better get that B talking about Rashida. And Rashida was like, hold up now. Like, don't be doing all that. Jeff's not standing up for his wife, nothing, just letting Franklin do his thing. Then Franklin goes into the room where his wife is at, and Jeff prays for the girl. Franklin announces that, because of your wife's action, she wants to be around Naomi. I'm not giving you any money. Jeff says, I understand, da 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 da. And you guys got to choose who you're going to be hanging around with. I first thought maybe something was going on between Franklin and Jeff. No, Jeff is a coward towards men. But you see how he is towards women and how he thinks of women. Jeff is hurting because he gives Franklin a hug and says, you need to see somebody about that. And he was like, no, I don't understand why he doesn't want to see someone about the burns that he got. But whatever. I guess we'll find out a little bit more. So Rashida and Jeff, they're traveling back home in the car. And Jeff said that was rude for what Rashida was doing. It's like, you didn't even check Franklin, da 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 da. He tells Rashida that Frank is not giving any money. And Rashida said he never was. That was just an excuse. He came to taunt Naomi. Because when has he ever given anything? And then Jeff said, you're just going to see it the way that you want to see it. And Rashida said, no, I see it the right way. And Jeff says that they are short on their down payment. She said, the Lord will provide, da 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 da. And Jeff says that you are to blame. And she says, me? You let that man call me out of my name and you did nothing. They arrive home. Jeff gets out the car, shuts his door. And Rashida is stunned because he did not come over to her side and open the door for her. He goes in the house and shuts the door while Rashida is still in the car. If that's not a sign for you, Rashida, I don't know what is. Whew, there's a lot going on the show. Ooh. This ain't even about why did I get married. This is like, why did I get married on Zeus Network, basically, but in a good way. I'm just joking in regards to that. But anyways, y'all leave your thoughts as to what you saw in this episode. Like this video and subscribe. Until the next one, peace.